How do you make a boring topic like compliance fun? How do you use your superpowers to create community and solve complex problems? And how do you use your creativity to create an interesting career and save a very special pair of shoes? Stay tuned for this fascinating conversation with Gitanjali Sakhuja, this episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. So today I'm super excited to welcome to the show Gitanjali Sakhuja. She is the General Counsel for Eyesea, located in Washington, D.C. As an in-house legal counsel, she operates from an assumption that all wicked problems can be solved. As a business partner with legal expertise, she figures out the real job that needs to get done. She leads with an eye to adapt, achieve wins, and foster mindful growth on her teams. She sees compliance challenges in a commercial context, finding the yes in the thorniest of situations. Gitanjali brings a Kaizen mindset to deliver collective value to organizations, considering all stakeholders while reducing legal and reputational risk. So welcome. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So tell us a little bit about your story. How did you even get to Washington, D.C. and doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I am a lawyer. I have lived many lives across 7 countries over my student and my professional career. So that has been spent working across multiple industries, multiple sectors, the UN, as well as multinational corporates. You mentioned a bit my background. Thank you for that. I do specialize in the creation, implementation, and direction of ethics and compliance programs. So that means essentially building organizational capabilities, strengthening ethical cultures, teams, controls, processes to mitigate risk across the enterprise. Throughout my career, I've really been drawn to roles where there's been no predecessor and there's really no blueprint, but there's a challenge of building up a framework. And how do you go about doing that? So I look for opportunities where I can make a difference as an architect, if you will, and integrate compliance and processes into all areas of the business. So ethics for me has really been that thread throughout my career to leave things better than I found them. And one of my secrets, and I know we'll publicly be sharing this here, is my creative tenacity and this collaborative approach that I bring to my work. And that's what really helps me to find that yes that you mentioned. It's that ingredient that actually fires up practical, accountable solutions with my business partners. And I find being that creative integrator is how I'm able to find common ground and then at the same time safeguard business interests. So I do currently work with a number of nonprofits, including Eyesea, one of the groups that you mentioned. Eyesea is an organization committed to sustainable marine life and ecosystems. They map pollution through crowdsourced photos and use that data to direct solutions. And when I'm not lawyering, I have a number of other interests as well too, including teaching Bollywood and Bhangra dance. I also mentor with a number of organizations, and I'm active with a number of women's leadership groups. All of this has come about in my newfound life that I've created here in DC. So I'm really thrilled to be doing what I get to do.
That's really exciting. And I love that there's so many threads from what you just said that I want to pull out. So, let's just start with one of the things that you mentioned as far as bringing creativity to your leadership. Creativity is such a key component to so many aspects of our lives. And yet so many of us get stuck in that routine of, just getting the job done and don't allow that creativity to flourish. How do you nurture that in yourself and in others?
I think creativity to me is one of those inherent traits that I didn't know that I had. Yeah. It was something, I think, as a child, I was encouraged by, oh, you did that coloring really well, or you did this project really well, right? To kind of see things outside of the box. I mean, yes, being able to sort of color in between the lines to be able to get that job done, but also to look at ways of how else can I get this done, right? One of the things that I've had to sort of dip into in my toolbox and over the entirety of my career is, when you are coming in to build new frameworks and not having this blueprint, you are given the green space, but you also aren't given a heck of a lot of resources to do what needs to get done, right? So one of those creative tenets that I continue to draw upon is, where else can I find those resources? And how else can I multiply influence and impact? Is there a cross-functional team that is feeling the same pain and has a problem that needs solving? How can I leverage their resources, their expertise, and then achieve these mutual wins, right? Which very much relies on being able to break down silos, to build trust, and to find those opportunities for synergy, right? So, one thing in the area of compliance is, if I tell people to do things a certain way, they're not going to do it.
Yes.
It's a very small percentage of the population. So I need to find levers that are going to resonate with folks, right? So if I'm going to demonstrate and put forward a case of, you've got a business objective that you want to reach, how can I help you get there? And oh, by the way, if there is some seamless way that I can thread in a compliance facet that I need to anchor a program or to move the needle on the program, how can I achieve that? And so that's kind of how that creativity mindset of mine kind of kicks in. And then looking for avenues that are going to make these lessons that I'm trying to impart land with the audience, right? How to make things fun. It's otherwise a very dry subject. It's not something that people besides myself get really jazzed up about and want to go to work doing, right? But
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I worked in a regulated industry, and when people started talking about compliance, we all just wanted to run for the hills, right? I mean, most people hear that word and go, oh my God, that just means a whole bunch of rules and regulations and stuff that I probably don't want to do because it's going to make my job harder. So I love bringing creativity and fun and embedding that in other processes. That's such a great that's such a great way of approaching that. So how do you think, you mentioned living in seven different countries, and you clearly have a very multicultural, background.
Mm-hmm.
Not only your nationality, your cultural background, but also your experiential background. How do all of those things inform what you just talked about as far as creativity, integrative? I would imagine that breadth of experience gives you a perspective that not many people have.
Absolutely. And I think I was actually talking to some peers last week on sort of life advice that we had been given, and how has that sort of shaped your career? I think one of the pieces, and I can't sort of trace back to who it is that had shared this, but it was a notion around having an interesting career, right? To make sure that whatever you were doing, it was interesting. It was interesting to you, right? Yeah. And so that has really been at the forefront of the choices that I made in embarking on my career. again, having this interest in creating frameworks and not being in roles that had a blueprint. That I also didn't have that in my life, right? My parents were immigrants to the U.S. and a good part of my childhood experiences were informed by the experiences that they shared with me and my sister. That included everything from travels every year to, new communities that they were a part of, to just the different cultures that we would get to experience. And that kind of, I guess, it put bells, I guess, in my shoes, right? That I wanted to be able to travel and I wanted to be able to experience new things. I wanted to immerse myself into different communities and really, have this interesting career. So my career has been far from linear. I have essentially just sort of skated to wherever that puck has been moving and playing a different game, whether it's, today I'm using that ball to play basketball, or tomorrow in another country I'm playing football. Each of those experiences, each of those places where I've been, I've gone solo and I've had to dig deep into what it is that I need. And, each of those countries has shaped me, has molded me. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm from the West Coast of the U.S. I'm from California, always will be a Californian at heart, but I'm a person who's been shaped by, a quarter of my life that I've lived in Denmark, or, the time that I spend in Indonesia, or the many times that I've lived in Switzerland. These experiences is what I have carried and used to craft and define a new version of myself in each place.
I love that. So in moving around, in doing all that stuff, we talk about facing, barriers as women leaders. Mm-hmm. You have the added complexity of being, facing the cultural and, your skin color, and you look different. Mm-hmm. How has that shaped, both in positive and negative ways, your career?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right? I have this double whammy of being both a woman and then a person of color wherever I've lived and wherever I've landed. And I can say in different settings, I could very, very well easily, have my disposition mistakenly viewed as being arrogant, or being too direct. And what I have come to sort of realize is, rather than sort of fighting against that, I've actually been adapting to it, right? And I don't mean adapting to it in a malintent way of sort of making myself smaller, but, utilizing the skills that I've acquired along the way, diplomacy being one of them. When you are this sort of cultural ambassador moving around from place to place, it's a lifelong practice, really. Mm-hmm. Right? And accepting that people's biases aren't going to change, or that I won't be able to change them, has really been an important growth edge for me. And, I know that I know that many people think that women should kind of take on a softer approach. I'm not going to be the first one to say I've been told so many times to smile more. And, with that, I'm very realistic, right? I learned that early on that it's unfair, but I know that confidence can often be taken, the wrong way.
Oh, yeah.
The way that I, try to approach conversations is by asking a lot of questions rather than coming from a place of telling, right? Yeah. I want to invite dialogue. And along the way, I think on the positive side of things, I've realized that my uniqueness and my lived experience is what really brings true value to my work, right? And I strive to be that example for other women of color. And encourage them to be themselves and let them know that, feeling vulnerable is okay. I've done it plenty in every place of needing to prove myself and work harder and, not necessarily smarter, but these are lessons that we learn over the tenure of our careers. And there's going to be times when you're going to be hard on yourself and you're going to be uncertain and unsure about decisions that you make. And I think it's also why it's very important to find a community and, have that community to support you and guide you for guidance, and particularly in these transitional times when you are moving constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, there's a couple of things I want to pull out there, but I want to go back to what you said about diplomacy. I know you worked at the UN for a little while, part of your career, and we have, in so many ways, we have a pretty confrontational society right now. And, a lot of times when everyone, and I won't just say women, but, we get in situations where we feel like something is unfair, our natural inclination, and I think our current cultural inclination, is to fight it, right? I'm going to fight it. And yet that's not, actually, it's not usually the most effective way, as you said it, to address issues of unfairness. It can be. I'm not saying that fighting it is always the wrong answer. It's not. But it's not always the right answer either. And just diplomacy plays such a critical role in creating success for ourselves. And I think it's an area where women in particular can excel and it can be a place of strength and I'm trying to think of the right word. But it's can be one of our superpowers, I guess is what I really want to say. It can be one of our superpowers. And clearly you've used that as one of your superpowers. Can you give us one example of where diplomacy has worked for you? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, sure. And I just want to preface by saying I think you're absolutely right, and I agree very much so that coming from a place of fighting, whether in my line of work, whether you say it's like you're fighting against anti-corruption or you're fighting against any particular cause in that matter, I think that is, it takes on a very sort of in-your-face approach, which doesn't translate well in the different environments that I've had to sort of work and operate within, right? And so one of the superpowers that I've had to sort of lean into quite heavily, and what serves as the basis and the foundation of my diplomatic practice is really leaning on empathy and understanding and trying to figure out what is the problem, right? What is it? What is it that we are feeling is lacking, is missing, is problematic, is impairing us, or is not allowing us to have that impact that we want to achieve. One such example is this is during a time when I worked at UNICEF, right? We're dealing with a shortage of life-saving commodities for populations under the age of 5, right? And this is, something I'm seeing in my capacity. I was leading one of their largest portfolios for essential healthcare commodities. And kind of putting up my hand and saying, hey, I'm seeing this, going around to other stakeholders in the same space and saying, hey, are you seeing this as well too, right? Instead of us independently sort of trying to, avail these treatments for our own populations that we're servicing, what about us kind of rallying together, unifying and coordinating the cumulative needs, and then ensuring all the countries that we support and all the programs that we support are able to equally access this pipeline, right? How do we make sure that there aren't going to be lapses in treatment? Because lapses in treatment for this population under 5 is devastating, right?
Yeah.
So sort of building and finding that commonality put people's sort of defenses down.
Yep.
We actually were able to bring in industry and share with industry aggregate forecasts to show where those needs were most pressing, bring in donors to also give that visibility, creating this platform that allowed for conversation, that allowed for that shared empathy to kind of take place, to allow for this understanding to take on. We ended up bringing in some large governments with the highest, disease burden as well too. And I actually found out last year that this platform that I helped establish is now on its 13th year of running. And it's been modeled for a number of other sort of, crisis situations that impact treatment, right? And we're talking about, 500,000 treatments that are essential every year.
That is so cool. And what I really love is that actually speaks to the second point that I wanted to pull out. So you kind of did a beautiful job of tying it together, because really it came down creating community. When you use the diplomacy instead of fighting, you have a much better opportunity to create community to solve problems, not just try to solve them in isolation. And again, community is another superpower of many women. And I know that that's one of your core values. And I love that example of how you use the diplomacy, breaking down people's defenses, and actually creating a community in order to solve the problems, rather than just getting out your sword and shield and, whacking away at the problem. And that's beautiful. So tell me about your commitment to community and what other ways that you're using that in your life and your career.
Absolutely. So just a side note to this group that I mentioned, the time that we spent sort of in the trenches to build up this framework, we ended up becoming really good friends out of this, right? So where otherwise you would be so-called competitors in this space, I mean, I don't use that terminology in the space of international development or humanitarian work, but in a way you essentially are, right?
Absolutely.
For funds, you have populations you're trying to serve, and so instead of looking at it, my population's more important than yours. It helped us actually find that common ground, and very much to your point of building and establishing community. So, as I mentioned, having very common threads that I have found that have showed up multiple times in my life, I found community to be one critical anchor to my foundation, and that's because I have found communities to be that place that I need to support my transition, right? And most of us, if you look at it, find those communities when you are convening around a shared problem, right? So, for example, you go to the gym because you want to get in better health, right?
Yep.
If your gym is a source or an avenue for community, there are other people who also have shared motivations and interests like you. As I moved here to DC and not being from the area and having a few friends only, community became that place where I thought, okay, I need to quickly take stock of what's available to me, and have found, for example, this group that I work with in mentorship, and that has been a rich source to cultivate not only a network for me of peer mentors, but an avenue to give back, right? And to be able to pay it forward and, to hold that door open and to pull others up behind me or alongside me. And, one of the things that is imperative for me is I had to stumble. I had to step on a lot of landmines. I had to fall down and make a lot of mistakes. And I want to make it so that the people that are coming up behind me or alongside me maybe don't have to make some of those mistakes, right? So taking time to mentor younger professionals, especially women in this profession, is one of my most valuable, I would say, assets. And I think there's no substitute for kindness. Kindness costs you nothing. Relationships are everything. Find those communities, that allow you to connect with peers who share similar backgrounds, experiences, or problems that they want to solve as well too. You don't have to go anything alone, right? And if they don't exist, create them. They're
Absolutely. No,
very easy to do.
Absolutely. And, that is such valuable advice because, today, especially with all the remote work, all the isolation that people have experienced both during and after the pandemic, because a lot of the isolation that was created during the pandemic really hasn't gone away.
Absolutely.
And so it's so important to create community. And I think we often forget that. I mean, the American ideal is often the rugged individualist, right? That we have to go out and, conquer the wilderness on our own. And a lot of us are raised with that to a large degree. And while there's nothing wrong with being strong in your individual skills and talents and strengths, we need those, but we're never as strong alone as we are, with others, with a community. And I love how you've been able to create that both in the work environment and in your personal environment, so that you're both using it to lift yourself up and solve problems and get the job done.
Absolutely.
That's just beautiful. So I'm going to change subjects just for one little minute, because I know I can see them and I know the viewers can see the shoes that are in the box behind you. Is there a story there that we need to hear?
Absolutely. So I love shoes. And I'm haunted constantly by this episode of Sex and the City that I think every a lot of your viewers might be familiar with, of the story about Carrie having more shoes and not being able to have a down payment on a house. That's not these aren't these shoes, but it's a reminder of priorities. These happen to be a pair of shoes that I did not need, had gone into a shop and was convinced that I absolutely needed to have them. They cost me a pretty penny. They are they have crystals in them. I wore them once. They hurt like I can't even tell you. And when I did wear them, I carried them in a bag to the venue, put them on, wore them, put them back into the bag, and then carried them home. Why? Because they are also so beautiful to look at. I thought they don't deserve a space, in a box in my closet. I actually went out and bought a box so that I could have them on display and they could, continue to bring me joy, even if they're never going to be on my feet again. But something's going to bring it.
I love that story. And I think that just sums up everything you said about your career and what you bring to the table in such a beautiful story, because I think every woman on the planet has done that, right? Bought a pair of shoes because they're gorgeous. You have to have them. You wear them. You can't stand them on your feet. I know I'm guilty of that because I hate uncomfortable shoes. Like if it were up to me, I would go barefoot all the time. I hate uncomfortable shoes, but yet they're so pretty, and you see them on other people's feet and you think, oh my gosh, that's so gorgeous, and that really makes the outfit and all of that. But then when push comes to shove, they really don't work for me. They don't work for me. And I love that you came up with a way to repurpose them in a way to still experience a way that they will work for you. And remind yourself, right? I mean, it's not only reminding yourself of the beauty and showing them off and using them in a different way, but it's also a little bit of a reminder, right? Of, do I really need that? And does that fit me, right? Do those things fit me? So you've created a whole, I love that. That's such a beautiful repurposing of the shoes, and it has so many different connotations. And I'm sure every woman watching is saying, oh yeah, I've got a pair of shoes like that. And
go and get yourself an unboxed and
absolutely
and enjoy them.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely love that story. So before we wrap up today, I loved so much of what you've shared. Where do you see, I mean, I know, you're embedded in lots of different things now, including your mentoring and your work and all those things that you're doing. But if you could really share what you see as your lasting legacy right now, or where you see your legacy developing, if you're comfortable with that, I'd love for you to share.
Yeah. I think I'm going to answer this in a bit of a roundabout way, but I think for me the words that I could, it's maybe not so much a legacy, but thinking a little bit about that impact that you want to have, right?
Yep.
And, whether we think about it sort of out loud or internally, and think about, knowing, and we talked about this earlier, right? About knowing whether the path that you're on is the right one. I think, spoiler alert, the answer is you don't, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, 100%. I agree with you.
Right?
You never know.
It's our insecurities that are pushing us sometimes to make decisions, thinking about those returns, right? We want to look for, we want that evidence before we actually make that move, rather than making the move and then finding the evidence, and kind of having this life with the least possible risk. But I think that's unrealistic. And I think what that does is it actually holds us back from pursuing our biggest dreams. And I think progress for me in particular has actually required me to strive for a brighter future, right? Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about, I've moved so many addresses more times than I can recall, but the biggest bet that I took on myself was to really seek out this interesting career, right? And all those trials, all those scars, they have been worth it to have that unique path. And so I think the impact is, kind of showing by example that it doesn't matter where your first step lands you. What matters is continuing to take steps, right? We always think it's the first step that's the hardest. I would disagree, and I would actually say it's that second step, it's that third step, it's, do you really want to keep moving forward? And at that first step, appreciate what you're feeling, right? Whether you're feeling guilty or grouchy or impatient or ashamed or whatever, that's okay. That's all part of that process, right? And I think that, growth and comfort, they won't coexist. Yeah. You do need to go through those periods of discomfort. You do need to go through those places of that give you the greatest angst, because what you want is on the other side of that, right? And so, every time I've been put in a position, even I go through those motions of, am I ready? I can tell you the things that I don't know how to do, right? And I'm not going to have all the answers right away, but point of getting to what I want out of that particular role is what I'm going to learn along the way. And you know, when I'm the most anxious, I tell myself and remind myself, I'm going to get to the other side. I'm going to be better. I know I can do more, and it's not going to last forever. Right? So I think that's my roundabout way of sharing sort of what's that legacy is knowing that you can get to the other side, that there is so much potential that we tend to leave on the table, and fear is real, anxiety is real, but there's so much on the other side of it, and befriending your fear and, you know, managing your anxiety, and getting to the other side and tapping into that potential. And once you do, magic happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you are totally speaking my language now. You know, one of the things that's been running through my head recently is the whole thing about fear. And sometimes fear can actually be our biggest roadmap, right? Mm-hmm. Because the thing that we're the most afraid of is often the thing that we care about the most. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think, oh, well, that's the most afraid of, so that's what I need to avoid. Mm-hmm. But often what you're most afraid of is what you really need to embrace, because that is where your heart may very well be. I mean, not always. I mean, I'm not talking about walking down a dark alley at night or taking completely unnecessary risks, right? I mean, you're all about risk management, mitigation, what you do. But at the same time, we have to follow that fear sometimes and embrace that fear as really an indicator of how much we care, how much we love, how much passion we have. And that often, to your point, is where our legacy lies. So that was a beautiful, beautiful share. Thank you so much, Gitanjali. You have been such an amazing guest. I love all the wisdom that you've shared. And if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about you, what you're doing, your mentoring, your Eyesea organization, anything else, how do you want them to reach out to you?
Find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I will be talking about Eyesea. We'll be talking about all the different organizations that I support as a mentor, the women's groups that I'm a part of. Anything that you want to connect about, I'm always happy to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I love that. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation with you in the future. And if you viewers are interested in learning more about the fear that you're facing, the legacy that you want to leave, or the story that you want to tell, please get in touch with me at Karen@daringtotranscend.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn also. And stay tuned for next week's episode.